5 gallons of blood, a hitchhiker enslaved for 7 years. A scene so brutal, the ratings board nearly shut down the entire film. These are the shocking moments Quentin Tarantino never wanted you to see in Pulp Fiction. After being rejected by every major studio, Tarantino created something so twisted, it's only whispered about in dark corners of cinema. The missing scene wasn't just cut, it was completely erased. Here's the story you weren't supposed to know. It all began in a small video store in Manhattan Beach, where two young movie fans, Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary, bounced wild, untamed ideas off each other about the kinds of films they wanted to make. One of those ideas would soon grow into something far bigger than they had ever imagined. Avary had written a script called Pandemonium Reigns, which contained a bizarre, unforgettable tale about a gold watch, a pawn shop, and a man in a leather mask. That strange, intense section would later become a crucial part of Pulp Fiction. But Tarantino and Avary's partnership wasn't like your typical Hollywood collaboration. After Reservoir Dogs caught some attention, they met in Amsterdam, piecing together scenes, sometimes literally taping sections of scripts together. But eventually, Avary branched off to direct his own movie, Killing Zoe. Tarantino, however, kept working, rewriting and refining the script for nearly 2 years. He added his signature clever dialogue, but Avary's ideas remained a major influence. When Pulp Fiction finally hit theaters, both men won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Avary's acceptance speech was famously odd. He simply thanked his wife and said he needed to pee. That night marked the peak of their creative collaboration. Strangely, though, they never worked together again after that. But the title Pulp Fiction has a much deeper origin. Before Tarantino adopted it, Pulp Fiction referred to cheap magazines from the 1890s. These magazines were printed on rough, inexpensive paper, wood pulp, that allowed them to be sold for mere pennies. The popularity of these pulp magazines exploded. Packed with action, crime, mystery, and science fiction, these stories captivated readers. Argosy, one of the first, sold over 500,000 copies a month. Characters like Detective Nick Carter became staples, featured in thousands of stories. The pulp shaped the way Americans viewed storytelling, raw, fast-paced, and full of larger-than-life characters. That's exactly what Tarantino wanted to capture in his film. The title wasn't just catchy, it was a nod to that gritty, rule-breaking world. But getting Pulp Fiction made, that wasn't easy. In 1993, Tarantino and producer Lawrence Bender made a deal with Jersey Films. The deal provided a tiny office and just enough funds to show the script to studios. Things seemed promising at first. Columbia TriStar even listed it as a project in development. But by summer, the film was rejected. One executive called it the worst script they'd ever read. They hated that characters died and came back. They didn't understand the humor. It was too violent, too strange, and made no sense to them. Some even feared the heroin scenes would destroy the movie. Others argued it wasn't worth making without a big star. But that rejection paved the way for Miramax. The studio, freshly bought by Disney, was captivated by Tarantino's script. Harvey Weinstein read it and saw something special. He didn't care about the bizarre structure or wild scenes. He gave Tarantino full control and funded the film with an $8.5 million budget, $500,000 under budget, no less. One of the smartest moves. Instead of paying big stars astronomical fees, they paid everyone the same weekly rate. In the early 90s, John Travolta was in career limbo. He was the washed-up star from Grease, better known for playing opposite Kirstie Alley than for anything else. When Tarantino insisted on casting him as Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction, Hollywood executives were baffled. Harvey Weinstein, still fresh from the Miramax Disney deal, fought hard to block it. He wanted Daniel Day-Lewis. He even tried to land Sean Penn. But Tarantino stood firm. After an intense back and forth, Travolta agreed to take a massive pay cut, down to just $140,000. It was a gamble that would change everything. One Oscar nomination later, Travolta was back on top, and Weinstein had to eat his words. Meanwhile, Samuel L. Jackson was fighting his own battle for the role of Jules. Jackson thought the part was his, until he learned Paul Calderon almost stole it. Furious, Jackson stormed into the audition, a greasy bag of Big Kahuna Burger in hand. One studio exec even called him Lawrence Fishburne. Not the best way to help. Jackson snapped, unleashed the full fury of Jules Winfield right there in the room, and left everyone stunned. That wasn't acting, it was pure, unfiltered passion. And that iconic Jerry curl wig? An accident. Someone bought the wrong one. But Jackson loved it, saying it gave him the perfect NWA vibe. Tarantino agreed. As for Matt Dillon, Tarantino had written the role of Butch Coolidge specifically for him. But Dillon hesitated. He wanted to sleep on it, maybe even play Vincent instead. That one pause. It cost Matt Dillon a career-defining role. The next day, Bruce Willis stepped in. He wanted Vincent, but when he saw Butch was still up for grabs, he took it. No hesitation, no ego. Just pure instinct. And it worked, especially in that chilling pawn shop scene. Dillon watched Pulp Fiction explode into a global sensation from the sidelines, while Willis rode the wave to one of his most iconic roles. And then came Uma Thurman, who wasn't even on the original casting shortlist. Michelle Pfeiffer, Meg Ryan, and even Madonna were all considered for MIA Wallace before Uma. But when she first read the script, she thought it was disgusting. Yet, her agent saw the gold and convinced her to meet Tarantino. After a long lunch and a deep conversation at her New York apartment, Thurman's perspective flipped. And just like that, she became MIA Wallace, the iconic woman who would forever be tied to that unforgettable cigarette on the bed moment. Originally, none of this was supposed to happen. Tarantino had written the role of Vincent for Michael Madsen, hoping to create a link to Reservoir Dogs. But Madsen dropped out to do a western. Likewise, Jules was meant for Lawrence Fishburne, but he walked away after deciding the script glorified heroin use. At one point, there were even talks of making Vincent and Jules British characters, with Tim Roth and Gary Oldman in the mix. Eddie Murphy and Charles S. Dutton were also considered. But then, Samuel L. Jackson walked in, and those names faded away. On a late May night in 1994, something bizarre happened at Cannes. A midnight screening, usually reserved for cult classics or oddball entries, exploded into a full-blown event. The movie, Pulp Fiction. It didn't sneak into the festival, it kicked the door down. Harvey and Bob Weinstein flew the entire cast to France like it was a blockbuster premiere. Cameras followed Travolta, Jackson, Thurman, and Willis everywhere. The buzz, electric. The jury was divided. 4 wanted to give the top prize elsewhere. 4 pushed for Tarantino. It took Clint Eastwood, the jury president, to break the tie. Pulp Fiction took home the Palme d'Or. Just like that, Quentin Tarantino became a household name. But that was only the beginning. Back in the States, the Weinsteins didn't let up. They launched a publicity campaign like it was an invasion. Instead of letting the film speak for itself like most indie producers would, they went big. A luxury luncheon at Eden Rock. Posters everywhere with Uma Thurman's face. Yacht parties. Powerful critics' endorsements. They even wrested the rights back from TriStar, the studio that had originally rejected the film due to its drug scenes. The Weinsteins had placed their bet on an $8 million, violent, dialogue-heavy movie with no clear genre. And they were all in. Then came the craziest part. Instead of a slow rollout in select theaters, Pulp Fiction launched in over 1,300 cinemas across America. For an indie film, unheard of. Hollywood thought they were insane. But by holding the movie back after Cannes and screening it at a few key festivals, the Weinsteins had created a tidal wave of curiosity. When Pulp Fiction finally opened wide, the buzz was unstoppable. In its opening weekend, it earned $9.3 million, barely edging out Stallone's The Specialist. But while The Specialist fizzled out fast, Pulp Fiction just kept gaining momentum. Week after week, people kept talking about it, quoting it, and returning to theaters for another dose. The film's drop-off in its second weekend was minuscule compared to the action blockbusters it had outlasted. By the end of the year, it was clear. Pulp Fiction had not only made money, it had rewritten Hollywood's rulebook. With an $8 million budget, it grossed over $213 million worldwide. That kind of return stunned the industry. It proved that R-rated films, filled with lengthy conversations and strange characters, could out-earn big-budget blockbusters. Disney, which had purchased Miramax, suddenly realized their quirky little studio was a powerhouse. And the Oscars took notice too. Pulp Fiction garnered 7 nominations, including Best Picture. It didn't win that category, Forrest Gump did. But that loss still sparks heated debate to this day. The briefcase in Pulp Fiction. It has become one of the most talked about mysteries in cinematic history. It's gold, it glows, and every time someone opens it, they look like they've just glimpsed something divine. But what was really inside? Fans have come up with countless theories. One of the most popular suggests it holds the soul of Marcellus Wallace. They point to the mysterious 666 combination on the lock and the odd band-aid on the back of his neck. Some believe the soul was taken through the back of his head, a nod to an old myth about the devil collecting souls that way. It sounds crazy, but when you rewatch the scene, when Vincent stares into the briefcase as if hypnotized, it starts to make sense. Jules surviving a shootout, calling it divine intervention, only adds fuel to the idea that the case holds something far greater than money. But not everyone subscribes to the soul theory. A more grounded group of fans believes the briefcase was filled with diamonds, specifically the same diamonds from Reservoir Dogs. This theory gained traction in the mid-90s when people began noticing connections between the two films. After all, Vincent Vega and Vic Vega from Reservoir Dogs are supposed to be brothers. Tarantino even considered making a movie about the pair. And when the co-writer of Pulp Fiction revealed that the briefcase was originally supposed to contain diamonds, this theory gained even more steam. Even though Tarantino dropped the diamond theory during filming, fans held onto it. Especially after Tarantino revealed that many of his films exist within the same universe. This made the diamond theory feel more plausible and connected to the larger narrative. But there's one theory that might be the wildest of all. Some fans believe the briefcase was holding Elvis Presley's Golden Lane suit, the one from his famous album cover. It may sound outlandish, but this idea took off online long after the movie was released. Fans pointed to a casual line from Jules where he says it's just his boss's dirty laundry. Maybe he wasn't joking. Plus, the glowing light. It could be the reflection of that shiny gold suit. And considering Tarantino is an avid Elvis fan, even having an Elvis character in True Romance, it doesn't seem so far-fetched. Some fans even suggest that the character's awe wasn't about the value of the briefcase, but its cultural significance. They weren't just looking at something valuable, they were witnessing something legendary. But here's the twist. Tarantino never wanted you to know what was in the case. That was the whole point. He mentioned it in multiple interviews. He wanted the audience to create their own interpretations and fill in the blanks. Tarantino is a master of leaving things up to the audience's imagination, encouraging them to fill in the blanks and create their own interpretations. This is part of his signature style, and he employed the same technique in Inglourious Basterds with Aldo Rain's mysterious neck scar. The unanswered questions are what make his films all the more captivating. One of the most infamous scenes in Pulp Fiction involved Marvin's death. The original version of the scene was supposed to be much more intense. Marvin's head was meant to show the consequences of an accidental shot in a shocking and exaggerated way, achieved using a prosthetic bust of actor Phil Lamar. The prosthetic was designed to release fake blood, and the team spent a lot of time filming it inside a Chevy Nova at a Burbank studio. However, this version was never included in the final cut. This wasn't a creative decision. It was a calculated move on Tarantino's part. He knew the MPAA ratings board would ask him to tone down some of the violence, so he filmed something extreme to give them a scene to cut. When the ratings board requested edits, he was able to remove the most intense version of the scene and keep the more disturbing, yet less graphic, basement sequence with the GIMP. This way, Tarantino made it appear as though he had compromised, when in reality, he was able to keep the scene he truly wanted. Phil Lamar, who played Marvin, later revealed the full story during an interview for Pulp Fiction's 30th anniversary. Tarantino had told him up front that the more intense scene was a deliberate setup. As Lamar recalled, Tarantino said, "We're going to show this young black kid getting hit for the ratings people, so you can leave in some other things." Lamar was only 27 at the time, and his role, though brief, became iconic. Despite earning just $5,000 for 3 days of work, that one part opened the door for him to a successful career in voice acting, landing roles in Futurama and Samurai Jack. In the original cut of Pulp Fiction, there was a scene that didn't make it to theaters, but it could have changed the way we see MIA Wallace and Vincent Vega. Right before their famous night out to Jack Rabbit Slim's, MIA surprises Vincent with a handheld camcorder. She's in her living room, playful but probing, asking him a series of rapid-fire questions. It wasn't just small talk, she was trying to understand him. One of her most telling questions was, "Are you a Beatles person or an Elvis person?" Vincent didn't even have to answer. MIA could tell he was all Elvis. That one detail might seem minor, but it set the tone for everything that followed. She had the upper hand, playing the curious and unpredictable host, while Vincent tried to keep his cool. The way she questioned him, slowly turning a silly game into something more personal, revealed how she liked to test people. And Vincent, calm as ever, played along, even as she pushed deeper. Their chemistry didn't come from romance. It came from this strange power struggle wrapped in charm and mystery. It felt natural, but you could sense the tension building even before they left the house. Now, here's the part most people miss. Later, when they walk into Jack Rabbit Slim's, MIA smiles and says, "An Elvis man should love this." In the final cut, that line sounds like a fun throwaway. But in the original scene, it made perfect sense. She already knew he was an Elvis guy. That restaurant, full of retro 1950s vibes, kitschy decor, and rock and roll energy, wasn't random. It matched Vincent's style, his attitude. That single cutscene added depth to the whole dinner sequence, showing how well MIA was reading him from the start. Tarantino loved that scene. He wrote it years before filming even began. But when it came time to edit, he made a tough decision. The pacing wasn't right. The interview felt too long, too familiar, like something you'd already seen in a dozen other movies by the early 90s. Tarantino, never one to follow trends, didn't want his film to feel dated. Even though it was one of his favorite moments between MIA and Vincent, he cut it for the sake of rhythm. It's a move that shows just how much thought went into every second of Pulp Fiction. He wasn't afraid to lose a good scene if it meant keeping the bigger picture tight and unforgettable. In the original cut of Pulp Fiction, there was another moment that never made it to the big screen, but it almost did. Eric Stoltz, playing the drug dealer Lance, delivered a wild and furious monologue that stretched nearly 3 minutes long. Shot in October 1993, it captured something strangely perfect. Lance was ranting about a gas station guy in Panorama City who gave him the wrong directions, intentionally. This smug-faced guy sent him on a useless 40-minute drive through the valley, and Lance lost it. Lance's meltdown was a mix of scripted lines and improvised rage, with Stoltz delivering sharp, angry, and oddly funny dialogue. It mirrored Vincent's earlier freakout over his car, showing how two dangerous men could lose it over trivial annoyances. Tarantino wanted to highlight how these men, surrounded by violence, were still undone by everyday frustrations. Originally, the scenes flowed into each other, leading into the MIA date, creating a comedic yet disturbing rhythm. But when the film neared 3 hours, Tarantino had to cut it. Though he loved the scene, he knew it was slowing down the pace. His editor, Sally Menke, said it was one of the hardest decisions made, but Tarantino knew it had to go. It reflected his commitment to keeping the movie's rhythm tight, a lesson he learned from Reservoir Dogs and applied in films like Django Unchained. Similarly, the Gimp scene's backstory was darker than what we saw. Originally, the Gimp was a hitchhiker, brainwashed and turned into a submissive, silent figure by Zed and Maynard. Tarantino filmed this longer version, but ultimately cut it, believing the mystery would have a stronger impact. The audience's imagination filled in the blanks, making it far darker than any shown footage. Tarantino revealed that the Gimp dies after Butch knocks him out, not from the punch, but because he's hanging by a rope, which tightens when he passes out. After years of suffering, the Gimp's chance at freedom becomes his final moment. In the original cut of Pulp Fiction, a deleted scene with Butch and the cab driver Esmeralda added depth to the film. Esmeralda, played by Angela Jones, wasn't just quirky, she had real substance. In the longer version, she shares how, in her Colombian culture, death is seen as a transition, not an end. She tells Butch about her grandfather's death and how it shaped her life perspective. Her insights weren't casual, but reflective and profound. Tarantino cast Jones after seeing her in Curdled, and she brought a calm, haunting quality to Esmeralda's character. In one key moment, Butch says, "I'm American, honey. Our names don't mean shit." Esmeralda pushes back, saying names and death connect everyone. She adds, "Violence is the most honest thing humans do," leaving Butch visibly shaken. The scene also explores Butch's feelings about violence. He confesses that killing Floyd didn't affect him, which later contrasts with his decision to risk his life to save someone else. His violent upbringing, with his father's death in a prison camp, makes his relationship with violence more complex. Fast forward to 2021, when Tarantino made waves by announcing plans to sell unseen Pulp Fiction scenes as NFTs. This included moments like the extended cab ride with Esmeralda. Miramax, however, sued Tarantino, claiming he didn't have the rights for such a release. Tarantino countered, arguing that NFTs didn't exist when his contract was signed and that he still held rights to other content. In early 2022, Tarantino released the NFTs, but instead of film scenes, buyers received scanned pages of the script with his narration. It was a bold, controversial move, challenging industry norms. The success of Pulp Fiction was groundbreaking. Made on an $8 million budget, it grossed over $200 million, turning Miramax into a Hollywood powerhouse. It also changed how big studios viewed indie films, proving they could be both artistically daring and commercially successful. Bruce Willis's decision to join Pulp Fiction was pivotal. Despite being one of the highest-paid stars at the time, he took the role not for money, but because he wanted to work with Tarantino. His involvement helped secure international deals that covered the film's budget before shooting even began. Willis's decision was a game-changer, paving the way for big stars to support indie films. His move helped reshape Hollywood, showing that indie films could thrive with big-name stars, blending art with commerce in a new way.